Thank you for having us, really.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for waking up also.
I am so impressed, yeah.
So what I wanted to do is more, obviously I'm not a journalist, and the idea that they had at DLD, which I think is a good one, is have more of an entrepreneur-to-entrepreneur talk. And I am really excited of being here with David on Tumblr because Tumblr is a company that I got to know when I met David. You know all the stories and you've seen the movies about the college dropouts. And when I met David, he was 20 and a high school dropout, right? And you had left high school to start Tumblr, and now every month, maybe over 100 million people in the world touch Tumblr in one way or another. And what I thought is there's people in the audience here who want to know what I want to know and what a lot of people want to know when they build companies, which is, you know, what's the magic? How come you are in a world that is so competitive and you're doing something? There's so many people aiming for self-expression. So what I wanted to accomplish in these 20 minutes is to somehow understand how is a company built out of nothing that it gets to be so popular. So again, this is not on a journalistic tone, it's more of an entrepreneur tone. So let me start with a general question. How do you do it?
So at its heart, Tumblr is a blogging platform. What really differentiates it, though, is really two things. The first is that we make it incredibly easy to post anything. So where traditional blogging was really about editorial publishing, Tumblr is really much more about things that look like some of the stuff I'll put on screen, which you'll see, you know, doesn't look like the WordPress blogs you're maybe used to. They tend to be much more designed. They tend to be much more sort of novel in the type of content. And that includes the presentation of the media. So rather than being these long editorial posts that potentially take hours to prepare, they're sometimes a photo off a phone. They're a link to an interesting article that the author just read. They are a set of photos from an entire trip. They're a quote from a conversation or an article. They tend to be little kind of encapsulated pieces of media rather than the long sort of editorial voice of the author. So yeah, these are just a few of them. That was sort of the first novel thing I mentioned. The second is beyond posting, the controls that we give you for the presentation of your blog. We are really one of the only platforms, and certainly one of the first platforms, to say, on our hosted service, it's not open source, it's not, you have to install this on your own server or get a developer to set it up for you. You can sign up, it takes seconds, but you can create, like all these things that I was just showing you here, really original, unique presentations, even if you're not a web developer. So we've attracted this really spectacular community of designers who spend a lot of time, a huge amount of time, meticulously creating these blogs that they feel kind of perfectly represent them. And compare that today to a Twitter or Facebook page where you're locked inside a vanilla template. Those are the things that kind of really differentiate it.
And tell us something about the growth of Tumblr in terms of, did it take off from the beginning? I mean, I know I met you a few months after you had started Tumblr. You had quickly gotten to like 100,000 users, but how did it grow? Was it constant? Has it been accelerating?
So the early growth that we saw was really around creators. It wasn't necessarily the kind of steep social network growth that everybody gets really excited about. But the reason we were so excited was, like the blogs that I'm putting on screen, they were really spectacular, talented creators who were trying to do something really new. It wasn't that they were all showing up because their friends were here. Instead, they were showing up because they were really inspired by the tools and they wanted to try and creating something new. And that was really our first community, were those creators. And what happened is we started to establish more and more of a network. By the way, the network was something that we didn't set out to build. It was really kind of an accidental thing we ended up with. All we wanted to do was make some novel tools for people to use to put stuff online. It attracted a great community of creators, and within about a year, that started to shift into a core community of creators and then a much bigger network of curators. So we don't really have a sense of what the breakdown is, but let's say it's 90-10, with 90% of our network, which is less the great talented original creators and more the people who are taking all of that content and bubbling it up, creating a huge surface area around all of this creative content. So that means that as a creator coming to Tumblr, if you do some really great work, it'll end up reblogged and distributed through the network and appearing on potentially thousands of blogs. So you show up with your spectacular photo. The average post on Tumblr is reblogged 9 times. That means the average post on Tumblr actually appears on 9 blogs, which means in total, that's 9 RSS feeds. It's 9 times those numbers of Twitter followers. It's 9 times the page views of all those blogs, 9 times the number of followers of all of those blogs, 9 times the Facebook friends of all of those blogs. So your content has this huge footprint, and that ends up reaching a much bigger audience than many of these creators were ever able to reach.
I have a WordPress blog and a Tumblr blog. And what I notice, and maybe this is a shared experience, is that you seem to, just like you, that you're a nice guy, you come across as a nice guy, Tumblr comes across as a nice place. Like for example, there are no comments on Tumblr, which is actually not bad, since most of the comments open any YouTube video and you will see what they're like, right? So I thought that it was interesting that you chose that people can like or reblog but not trash you, right? Is that on purpose?
Absolutely. I mean, it wasn't that we had anything, well, let's see. So in trying to keep Tumblr a great place for creators, or in trying to make Tumblr a great place for creators, we really looked at the things that encouraged creation. And I think it's very easy when building a product hoping to get hundreds of millions of people in the world using it. Certainly if you're thinking about social before you're thinking about creative tools. A lot of these social tools that increase engagement are really horrible. I mean, messaging out in the wild can be a real mess. Commenting makes YouTube a pretty horrible place. Getting tagged in a photo unexpectedly that might be a really unflattering photo from you at a party last night that you had no say in, it's a pretty awful experience sometimes. So instead, we kind of oriented Tumblr around things that were really sort of about the creator, about the things that they explicitly put there, and really about their own self-expression, rather than just creating a network that kept people really busy and kept a lot of people paying attention. And in focusing on those creators, interestingly, we created a network that I think is, as much attention as anything else. Today, I'll run through a few quick stats. That big audience with the surface area I was describing actually reaches about 120 million people, according to Quantcast, every month. And we're today generating about 15 billion page views every month and growing quickly. So that's without a lot of sneaky tools for engagement. In fact, it's I think today still too difficult to really, as a new user, get on Tumblr and start interacting with the blogs there. But for those people who are there, they get tremendous amounts of positive feedback, and it really goes a long way to keep them making their best stuff. And as long as we have creators who are creating great stuff, we have this very enthralling media network that a lot of people, as you can see, a lot of people hang out on.
And now to a more personal, like you, David, building this company. So you were 20, or you're 25 now when you started this company, and you just did a round where you raised, I think, something like 80 million, evaluation close to $1 billion. How does somebody so young get to do this? And also, who are you getting now, or what are you doing to make this, turn this into a global company that functions sort of as an adult company, the Larry and Sergey story with Eric Schmidt, or are you making any moves in that direction?
So our two big sort of, I guess I call them marketing efforts, although I cringe at calling them marketing, are really first embracing creators as much as we can, which we found is something really kind of, I think, novel today in a sea of technology companies that are obsessed with networks or obsessed with platforms. But are, I think, in the process becoming very kind of hostile to creators. Facebook and Twitter, which are spectacular platforms and really great really powerful networks, don't really play off of the elements of creation that have kind of come to define Tumblr. So one is really just embracing that creative community. The other is the international community. So I think today the breakdown is, good. So we've had extraordinary growth in Brazil recently, but as you can see, we're still a very US-centric company. I think today about 45% of all of our traffic comes from the US. And we've never done much to kind of deliberately go after an international market, but we've never thought that we were so exclusive in the way we were designing the platform. In fact, now as we've started to bring more and more international people onto the team, we recently hired Andrew McLaughlin, who was running policy at Google for nearly a decade and has a spectacular eye towards its international stuff. We've been continuing to grow our international team, or excuse me, I should say just this year, really starting to push and grow our international team. And it's just to take this company that's a bunch of Americans, a bunch of American kids too, a bunch of young American guys, and start to orient more of the way we, it's not our content, but the ways that we filter content, the types of tools that we're building, try and make them kind of more accessible to, I won't even say more accessible, to try and filter our network in ways that are more appealing to a global market.
And the fact that you were always in New York, in Manhattan, and you were not in Silicon Valley, did you ever have any serious case of Silicon Valley envy?
It's been really wonderful being the underdogs. The technology scene in New York today is really spectacular. Being a smaller community, it's just incredibly supportive. It's not nearly as hyper-competitive, and actually that's something I really appreciate. And today, we're really going all in on the East Coast thing. We're doing most of our, even though we're doing a tremendous amount of recruiting on the West Coast, everybody we're hiring, we're bringing to New York, and that's given us a really interesting kind of competitive advantage.
Is it easy to get people to move from California to New York?
It's much easier than convincing them to come to Tumblr San Francisco versus Foursquare San Francisco or Facebook or Google. Instead of fighting for them on the same plane, we're going, hey guys, we've got something totally different to offer you over here. And so far we've had a lot of luck with that. So half of the people we've hired this year are reloads, most of those from the West Coast.
And so tell me, where do you go from now? And especially, does Tumblr have the same issue or similar issue to Twitter, which is that tremendous growth in popularity, but very little revenues in proportion to the popularity?
So, we've had spectacular investors from the very beginning who've really encouraged us to seek kind of scale and audience before we sought revenue. We're 5 years old now, and obviously taking revenue much more seriously. The nice thing now, being very well capitalized and still having supportive investors who are encouraging us to experiment, is we're really using the next few months, the next couple years, to pursue the novel approaches to revenue. Because with that many page views, we could throw an AdSense ad on there tomorrow and be profitable. The question is, can we come up with means of revenue that are actually really beneficial to the community? So just one example I'll give real quick that I'm just couldn't be more happy with, and has really done something special for our community. You pick up your iPhone or Android phone today, it's got a marketplace of apps with hundreds of thousands of apps in there that can be yours for $1, and that dollar will permanently, it's a permanent investment that will, it's an investment that will permanently enhance the functionality of that phone you carry with you all the time. On Tumblr, we've given our great creative community the ability to create really beautiful skins for these blogs that look unique, they're incredibly customizable, and we let them spend as much time as they want to creating these beautiful things, go out there and sell them for anywhere from $10 to $50 each. And our community, much like you guys carrying your phones around, are thrilled to have access to, in our case, it's thousands of these really beautiful novel themes that can be theirs for $10. They can have this incredibly gorgeous, customizable website, and most of that money goes into the pockets of those developers. So today we're writing these big hundreds of thousands of dollars a year checks to some of the most talented designers in our community, and that group and that revenue is growing really quickly. So that's meaningful revenue for us that we're getting by actually enhancing the quality of our network and giving our users sort of more tools and privilege. So we're using the next few months to explore more and more things like that to see how quickly that, or whether or not, how close that can get us to green. And we'll save the ads for later.
We're coming to the end now, and I wanted to end with a more personal question about sort of lifestyle. And you, when I met you, as I said, you dropped out of high school. Now you're 25. You built this amazing company. Is education overrated?
Well, so I used to commit a lot of code to Tumblr. I'm a programmer by background. After a while, it became very clear I was only getting us in trouble. And a lot of the brilliant engineers who have joined the team are CS backgrounds and things. But probably only about half.
But I'm asking also about recruiting. As recruiting, like when you recruit, do you think? Because you read about Google and saying, what were your SAT scores? What were your? And some companies are very academic for. But I'm saying, when you think of Tumblr and you think your own history, when you recruit
it's
people,
engineers, right? It's engineers that we all need more than anything. I think the interesting thing is that academia doesn't actually spit out very good engineers. And we've had a little bit of early luck. And to be honest, the way I plan on competing with Google for talent down the road is not by going after the same talent they are, or even looking for talent that's already kind of made it all the way through. Instead, I'm kind of excited to seek out people who are kind of the burgeoning great engineers and help them. Get them in classes, get them sitting down with our team, getting them on small projects where they can actually kind of become acclimated to working on a real engineering team. Because Google is going for these guys that made it through Stanford and Princeton, have never actually worked on a pragmatic engineering project before. Meanwhile, we've picked off 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old interns who are really great in spending a little bit of time with our world-class engineering team, get spun up really, really quickly, and can very often get more value out of that than dicking around in Stanford for a few years. Yeah.
Very well. So with that note, we end the conversation. I hope you guys had a good time. We certainly did.